couple started their lives with a promising future. They have a baby girl called Jane. She brought so much joy and happiness into their lives. They raised Jane with so much pride and hope, but that was not to last. Jane was facing hardship after her parents were killed by a rival gang in her city. She tried to make ends meet, but it was difficult for her. So Jane traveled thousands of miles to another country in search of a better life and hoping to forget the sorrows of her past. She got on a train and traveled for several days. On getting to the new country, Jane tried her hands at multiple odd jobs in order to feed herself and get a place to lay her head. She stayed in a tent with some homeless people because that is all she could afford. She was, however, determined to change her situation and live a better life. As time passes, the dream of a better life gets darker and impossible. Jane faced a lot of obstacles, including language barrier and a lack of legal status in the new country. Jane worked from house to house, cleaning and cooking for people. She did this for several years. After several years of working tirelessly, she gathered some money and used it to buy some books. Then she enrolled in night schools. Jane barely gets any sleep because of the hard work during the day and her commitment to school at night. One day, Jane was caught sleeping at work and was fired without pay. All her dreams that were taking shape came crashing down, and she was quickly back to having nothing again. Jane decided to try learning a trade, but no one was willing to hire her because she did not have prior experience. Every morning, she will walk several miles to a commercial center in the middle of the city. The commercial center has a lot of businesses. Jane would go there every day just to watch interactions and how business owners make decisions with the hope of getting an opportunity to get job. She did this severally, but nothing changed. One day, an old man wanted to replace his personal assistant, who is now old and nearing retirement. So the old man went to the commercial center with the hopes of finding the perfect replacement. He wanted to hire a guy because of how tasking the duties are. The old man spoke with a few guys at the commercial center, but they refused to work for him because the payment was too low. Jane approached the old man and said she is willing to do the job, that she is okay with the payment. The old man got curious and inquisitive. He wanted to know why Jane was willing to do a strenuous job for less money. Jane stated that she is in a difficult place and is willing to work hard to change her circumstances. The man decided to hire Jane. Jane and the man traveled on their feet for miles and finally arrived at a gigantic gate which led to a big estate. Jane wasn't sure what they were doing there, but decided not to ask too many questions. As they went through the gate, Jane noticed a lot of people were greeting the man and bowing in his adoration. Jane was confused and wondered what she had gotten herself into. Jane was handed over to the head of the staffers for orientation and the direction for her new duties. The old man is actually the owner of a big coffee company, serving the entire country and the neighboring countries. Since the old man's wife died several years ago, he has found it very hard to trust anyone, and he personally hires his own assistants after taking them through series of tests. The old man has 2 sons who are wasteful and selfish. They party all day and night, squandering their father's wealth. The old man has tried severally to help his sons to be better men, but they refused and spends the old man's money lavishly. Often they will fight as to whom will inherit the company, but the old man never trusted any of them because of their sense of judgment. Jane grew into her duties and started learning the rules around the estate. After her daily duties, Jane found time to pick up reading again and would read all the business journals that were in the estate. This became a usual practice for Jane. One day while Jane was reading a business journal, the old man walked by her and Jane suddenly dropped the journal as she was afraid that she might be fired because the instruction to all the staffers is to never touch anything in the estate that wasn't given to them. The old man was also startled to see Jane reading, and this terrified Jane such that she started crying, knowing she had broken a major rule. The old man walked up to Jane and comforted her to stop crying. He wanted to know if Jane knew or understood what she was reading. He decided to ask Jane some questions and was surprised at the brilliance of Jane's answers. He decided to promote Jane and gave her a role with higher priorities. Jane became the old man's top personal assistant, which meant she is the only one that could make his food and serve him in his private quarters. The other staffers got jealous of Jane's sudden privilege. The old man's 2 sons also became weary of the sudden closeness between their father and Jane. As time passed, Jane spent more time at the master's chambers, and it was very obvious to everyone that Jane has become the old man's friend and confidant. Jane was present in business meetings and took notes, gaining access to a lot of information. The old man's sons did not like the idea that Jane was getting more attention by their father, that she was more involved in the coffee business than they are. The sons therefore united to blackmail Jane in order to make their father lose interest in her. The sons decided to use the help of some jealous staffers who have served their father the longest but are also jealous of Jane's meteoric rise to higher ranks. The sons decided to steal some money and jewelry from their father. Then they decided to hide these items in Jane's room while she was away serving the master at his chamber. The master noticed the missing items and ordered a wide search. After the search was conducted, the items were found in Jane's room, and the old man was very disappointed with Jane. He stated that if Jane needed anything, all she needed to do was ask from him, and he will give her double instead of stealing. Jane pleaded her innocence, but it was difficult to believe. Jane was fired and let go. Jane left the estate in search of another life, and no one heard about her again. One day, while the old man was walking around in the estate, he overheard his eldest son thanking one of the staffers for helping to get rid of Jane. The old man was sad and knew that he had made a grave mistake by letting go of Jane. He couldn't sleep through the night and wept bitterly because he was deceived to firing the only person that was good to him. He knew he had to find Jane, but didn't know how and where. The next morning, he dashed out and went back to the commercial center, hoping to see Jane with the intention to apologize and to ask her to come back. He searched the entire commercial center from morning till night, asking different people if they had seen Jane, but all his effort were not successful. The man tried some more for several days, but he couldn't find Jane anywhere. This made the man very depressed and he got sick. The old man put out a search bounty for Jane with a heavy reward for anyone that could find her. With the money Jane had saved up from working at the estate, she decided to travel back to her home country in order to start a new life. Because her image has been tarnished, she also feared that if she stayed behind, the people that plotted against her will do anything to see her fail. So she believed the best decision was for her to return back home. So Jane returned home and decided to find a job in a local coffee company in her hometown owned by Mr. Baker. Jane believed that the knowledge and experience gained while working at the estate will make her a good candidate for the job. During the interview, Mr. Baker asked Jane why she is a good fit for the position she applied for. Jane narrated her story, and Mr. Baker quickly recognized Jane. Mr. Baker has been a longtime protege of the old man that Jane served at the estate. Mr. Baker really respects and adores the old man. Mr. Baker owes some of his success to the guidance of the old man. Mr. Baker was aware of the situation as the old man has put out countless messages and requests to all his friends and associates to help locate Jane. But Mr. Baker had no idea that Jane was living in the same city with him. Mr. Baker told Jane that she has to return to the old man immediately, but Jane refused. Jane decided that she will not go back. She feared that the sons will come up with another plot that may cost her more than she lost initially. But Mr. Baker convinced her that she must go back. Mr. Baker continued to convince Jane, but no to avail. So Mr. Baker then offered to go with Jane to see the old man. Mr. Baker promised to support Jane throughout the journey and also promised that if things don't go well, he will make sure Jane returns home safely and she can have a job in his coffee company. Jane finally agreed to the plan, and they both traveled immediately to go see the old man. On getting to the estate, the old man had passed. Both Jane and Mr. Baker were very disappointed. Jane wanted to return immediately, but Mr. Baker thought they should stay for the funeral so they can both pay their last respect before returning home. At the funeral, Jane reconnected with some of the staffers that were good to her while she served the old man. After the funeral, Jane and Mr. Baker were on their way to the airport to catch a flight back to their hometown. After the funeral, the lawyer gathered the family and some staffers to read the will. During the reading of the will, the old man's sons were excited to hear the will with the hopes of living lavish lives, when they were shocked to learn that their father did not leave them anything from his inheritance. The old man had left the coffee company and the estate to Jane. At this time, Jane and Mr. Baker were getting ready to board their flight when security officials at the airport were informed to delay the flight. Jane did not want to go back to the estate, but was convinced by Mr. Baker and some elders of the family. Jane went back to the estate and reluctantly joined the rest of the family at the will reading. She stated that she doesn't want the inheritance and would return home to live her life. Mr. Baker and some senior staffers, alongside some elders in the family, pleaded with Jane to take the offer, as she would be doing the right thing. After much convincing, Jane agreed to manage the coffee company and the inheritance of the old man. She took the coffee company to higher realms and revamped the estate. She reduced the number of the staffers and empowered them to start small businesses. Twice every year, Jane opened the estate to different people from the city, regardless of their class or social status. She feeds them and uses the event to support orphans. Jane never forgot where she came from. She returned to the homeless shelter to help those in need. Through her determination, resilience, and kindness, Jane built a legacy that would inspire generations to come. Jane's story is a testament to the power of perseverance, integrity, and the belief that no matter how dark the journey, there is always a way to turn hardship into hope.
Never thought it would be so hard. I grew up without a scar, just living my life with no big worries. And I've always known what I want, just didn't know what came along. Finding myself much less happy back in